once and for all.
It will happen in the 1 o'clock hour. House Republicans today will vote for the American Health Care Act.
It makes me mildly nauseous to think that we might have had some impact on the election. But honestly, it wouldn't change the decision.
I think he should be fired because he exercised very, very poor judgment.
President Trump is marking the National Day of Prayer with an executive order protecting religious freedom.
We want to create peace between Israel and the Palestinians. We will get it done.
Who do we root for in this from the American perspective?
I'm rooting for Marine Le Pen because Macron is just like a sock puppet of the failed Euro establishment.
If you saw my monologue on Monday, I had a few choice insults for the president. I don't regret that.
The number one rule of stand-up comedy is what? Be funny. This wasn't funny. It was vicious. It was nasty. It was just a vulgar attack.
Clock out in Iowa, and Pete is at the West Dubuque Tap, where, Pete, what beer is on tap this morning?
Come on, this is called Duber, which is the Dubuque. It's made right here in Dubuque. So,
I had that.
Promises made, promises kept. We said there'd be beer at the top of this hour, so of course there is.
Checking
here at the West
IDs
Dubuque
there,
Tap.
Pete.
You also said you were paying for
IDs checked. Yes, I am paying for it, apparently. Yes.
All right, great.
So, good people out here.
We're going to talk to some of the folks coming up in the next half hour right here on Fox and Friends.
And maybe some people are toasting the anticipated approval through the House anyway of a replacement for Obamacare. It's finally going to happen. And they say, Kevin McCarthy, it's guaranteed to have the votes necessary to move to the Senate.
This is great if you're a Republican, if you are a Donald Trump supporter, if you are the president, and in their opinion, if you're an American. It is great.
So they will vote today on the American Health Care Act, we are told, in the 1 o'clock hour. What is extraordinary about this, and, you know, for the most part, Republicans always want to know how much something's going to cost before they vote on it. They really don't know how much this is going to cost. And some are saying, well, why the rush? The rush is they've got exactly the number of votes. It supposedly, the quote is right on the button. So I think they probably want to take the vote before anybody changes their mind.
Republicans can only lose 22 votes. And some of the holdouts were Congressman Fred Upton and Congressman Billy Long. The president met with them, and they said as long as people are with pre-existing conditions will be covered, then we'll support this. And so the president said, all right, so now that coverage, they'll get up to $8 million for pre-existing conditions.
So they get some of the moderates. They already had the Freedom Caucus because of some changes that they wanted. And for one thing, before we get the details of it, one thing, and before we get the CBO report, not that it matters, they're going to vote on it anyway, one thing is clear, President Trump really worked the room.
He did.
He was relentless. He listened. They reacted. It wasn't just, you better do this or I'm going to primary you. It was, what do you need? I understand. Can we get this done? He left it to Paul Ryan for a while. That didn't work. Tom Price, it didn't work. The vice president laid the groundwork. The president seemed to have knocked it home. But Elijah Cummings in today's playbook, on Politico's playbook, said as he walked out after hearing the news that we just shared with you, said, congratulations, we just got the House back. Well, because Democrats feel as though this is going to be, it's going to be bad for Republicans in the big picture.
Well, when you saw that figure a month or two ago where something like 24 million Americans were going to wind up losing their health care, that is a great political ad for the Democrats, whoever's going to run against any of the Republicans coming up in 2018. But here's the thing. What if it's, and the hope for everybody is that this is actually better, reduces taxes and stuff like that. And ultimately, when it comes to politics, this is going to redeem Speaker Paul Ryan. Plus, it's going to give President Trump his first big, and it is big, legislative win.
Yeah, it allows them to now focus on tax reform after this goes through. You might ask, what's the difference in what there was with Obamacare and what there is now if this does pass in what many are calling Trump care? Tax credits to help buy insurance. So if you're under 30 years old, you're going to get $2,000 a year in tax credits. If you're over 60, you're getting $4,000 a year. No more limits on health care savings. No more fines if you decide you don't want to do this. And insurance companies can set their own prices so that older people people who need more care, they pay a little bit more.
And Tom Price is going to have some flexibility, Health and Human Services Secretary, to make some changes because the president pledged to be able to buy insurance across state lines, number one. And number two, we got to get the cost of prescription drugs down. That's the key. People got to stop gouging. We got to find a way to rein in the pharmaceutical industry in a way that's going to help the American people. I'm all for making a profit, but not with the way it's constructed right now. It's not working. And if the average American can have affordable drugs, because we're seeing the copays go through the roof, then they'll start saying he or she, my representative, is responsible for this. If they're not and they rock it up, they are responsible for this.
Okay, so today, step one, it will be passed by the House, we understand, in the 1 o'clock hour, then on to the Senate, and then on to the president's desk. If the
Sounds
Senate
so easy.
okays it. It does. The problem is the Senate. Meanwhile, speaking of Capitol Hill, FBI boss Jim Comey, the FBI director, was up on Capitol Hill yesterday, and it was really interesting. He was called on the carpet. Hey, what exactly were you thinking when you announced in public, that you were reopening the Hillary thing and all that other stuff? And he doubled down and essentially said, it was he was mildly nauseous, thinking that he might have an impact on the election, but at the same time, he would have done it again.
All right, listen to what he said yesterday.
I could see two doors, and they were both actions. One was labeled speak, the other was labeled conceal. Having repeatedly told this Congress, we are done and there's nothing there, there's no case there, there's no case there, to restart in a hugely significant way, potentially finding the emails that would reflect on her intent from the beginning and not speak about it would require an act of concealment, in my view. Look, this was terrible. It makes me mildly nauseous to think that we might have had some impact on the election, but honestly, it wouldn't change the decision.
One other thing that he mentioned was, remember when Loretta Lynch wound up in the same airplane on the tarmac out in Arizona as Bill Clinton? And Comey said that was the capper for him. That was going to make his decision not to prosecute Hillary Rodham Clinton himself. He was going to make the announcement rather than having to come out from the Department of Justice. He thought people would think that was fishy. But then he cited other reasons why he made that particular announcement. And he said, including one I can't talk about yet. What is that?
He also
can't
mentioned,
talk about yet.
He did talk about Anthony Weiner. He said they were investigating him and his emails when he allegedly had some sort of a whatever with a minor. So they went into his emails. He had hundreds of thousands of emails that were sent to him from his wife, Huma Abedin, who was the assistant to Hillary Clinton. And they went through those emails, and there was classified material in those emails. So then that's why they opened up the investigation into Huma Abedin and her emails and Hillary Clinton's emails 11 days before the election.
And it's just so, for the legal experts, they just cannot believe that Huma Abedin is not indicted, because they say, well, the intent wasn't there to move confidential and top secret stuff to another laptop. When they asked her to make everything, bring everything to the State Department, she did not bring that laptop. She said she didn't realize it was on that laptop.
Yeah.
You personally forwarded thousands of times.
So Anthony Weiner, someone last night on Fox was saying, of all the people that doesn't need classified information.
Well, that was Lindsey Graham, too.
Yeah, it was Lindsey Graham.
But I'd like to add this, too. Al Franken was all over the Russian angle. What about the Russians? Did they want Donald Trump? He said, no. They just hated Hillary Clinton. It was ever running against Hillary Clinton. They were for. That was the whole thing. They go, what about Donald Trump's linkages to Russian investment? Basically said we have
how can you blame James Comey? Because there's so many things. She lied at the UN, that press conference, saying she only had one device. Then she said she didn't have a secret server. She did. And then you have Huma Abedin sharing classified information. You have Loretta Lynch on the airplane.
But you indict him.
Sure, but ultimately Hillary Clinton, as late as Tuesday, was blaming James Comey for her losing the election in Russia. But you look at what was done, and the Democrats all said, look, James Comey came out, 11 days before the election. He came out because her trusted aide, Huma Abedin, was forwarding classified information to her husband to print out. So don't blame Comey. Don't blame Russia. Mrs. Clinton, you've got to blame Huma Abedin.
All right, so let's talk about Susan
yourself.
Rice for a second. We know that there's a lot of intrigue around what's going on with the unmasking of Americans as in terms of what the NSA was tapped into for a matter of years. So if you look back, how many unmasking requests were done by the Obama administration? In the year before, I guess it was 2015, there was about 600 requests to unmask Americans on the other side of NSA wiretaps. And wiretaps is used, of surveillance, I should say. Last year, there were thousands of requests.
30,000.
So Diane, Susan Rice, who's National Security Advisor, was probably doing those requests, or supervisor, or made the request herself, has been asked to go in front of Lindsey Graham's subcommittee. She refused yesterday. Refused to go. And among the people that are flabbergasted by that is Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein. She thinks she ought to reconsider it. You know why? Because she already went on a week ago, answered these same questions on CNN with Fareed Zakaria.
Yeah, but
how
Brian,
could you turn down the Senate and say yes to CNN and say, well, I don't want to talk about it now?
Because,
I'm sure.
Because of the invitation. She says the invitation was from a Republican. It wasn't bipartisan, so she's not going to show
And wouldn't
up.
you rather interview with your friends than many people that are against you?
Well, it just, you know what, Ainsley, that you're using logic. The logic that she's using to get out of that testimony makes her look terrible. And he was, Donald Trump, the President of the United States, tweeted about that. He said, Susan Rice, the former National Security Advisor to President Obama, is refusing to testify before his Senate subcommittee next week on allegations of unmasking Trump transition officials. Not good! Exclamation point.
Well, here's the thing. She is apparently going to cooperate with Congress, but behind closed doors. She does not want to be seen on television spilling the beans. So, that's the very latest on Susan Rice.
Now
Abby,
let's hand it over to Abby Huntsman.
Guys, I've got nothing to hide.
Thank you very much.
And I do have some headlines to bring you this morning. Good morning to all of you. Hope your Thursday's starting off well. To a Fox News alert now, and a brand new warning about deadly truck terror attacks. The TSA urging truck owners and retail agencies to be on the lookout for terrorists who may steal their vehicles and use them as killing machines. Well, this coming after recent ramming attacks worldwide, including one at Ohio State University and the Bastille Day massacre last summer in France. And Texas could soon be the first state to ban sanctuary cities under the Trump administration. Lawmakers giving final approval to the new law, threatening to throw police chiefs in jail if they refuse to cooperate with federal immigration officers. Well, the bill now heads to Republican Governor Greg Abbott, who says he is getting his signing pen warmed up. The measure expected to go into effect on September 1st. And check this out. Brand new video showing Team USA in full force off the Korean peninsula. Hornets and Super Hornets flying over the USS Carl Vinson and other Navy ships. 2 South Korean destroyers sailing by our side. The show of force as tensions continue to rise with North Korea. We'll keep a close eye on that one.
All right.
Your headlines.
Thank you, Abby.
Thanks, Abby.
Meanwhile, straight ahead on this Thursday, the president is just hours away from signing his 34th executive order protecting religious liberty. Next up, the chairperson of the National Day of Prayer, which is today, and the daughter of Reverend Billy Graham, Anne Graham Lotz, is going to join Ainsley to weigh in.
And it could revolutionize your breakfast. How you can get your coffee and your bagel in just a bite. You heard me.
Sign me up. Morning, Pete.
As our country's religious leaders gather to celebrate this National Day of Prayer, President Trump is expected to sign an executive order today protecting religious liberty. Our next guest is the chairperson of the National Day of Prayer and the author of the book, The Daniel Prayer. There's a picture of it. So joining us now is the daughter of the Reverend Billy Graham, Anne Graham Lotz. Anne, thank you so much for joining us.
Ainsley, thank you for having me. It's my
You're
pleasure.
welcome. It's going to be a very busy day for you. We're going to talk about the National Day of Prayer coming up. But first, the president is signing this executive order. It's his 34th executive order protecting religious freedom. What are your thoughts about that?
You know, I'm so thankful for it, and I'll be there this morning. So it's an answer to prayer. You know, God, there is a God in heaven. He hears and answers prayer, Ainsley. And I think the president being willing to sign this executive order is evidence of that. That's an answer to a lot of people's prayers.
There were some companies that made the news because of this type of thing. There was the meatpacking company that had religious literature in their break room, and the past administration had said you can't do that. There was the florist that decided not to provide flowers for a gay couple that wanted to use this florist, and the florist felt like for religious reasons she didn't want to do that. So what does it mean for companies like this?
You know, I will tell you what it means generally speaking, and the president has come to Washington, he has said, to bring about a lot of change politically, nationally, and there's another dimension. We need spiritual change, and I believe with all of my heart that our nation needs to return to the God of our fathers and return to our faith of our fathers. And so what the president is doing is sort of an executive order, maybe helping that, but each individual needs to return to God. And I'm just praying on this National Day of Prayer that God will hear our prayers. There'll be tens of thousands, millions of people, Ainsley, today praying for our nation, praying for our president, praying for the freedom that we've had to be continued to enjoyed as we express our faith in the living God. So, you know, I'm delighted that he's doing it, and pray that God will continue to give us the freedom that as Americans we've enjoyed.
What's your message to the protesters that have gotten so angry? This country seems so divided. And what is your message to the ACLU, who is against this, that says that people are going to be discriminated against?
You know, my message, I'm not going to get involved in the politics of it, but God loves the whole world, Ainsley. He loves Democrats and Republicans. He loves those kids and those people protesting. He loves the ones standing up. He loves people on both sides of the aisle. And Jesus came to bring peace. He came to bring goodwill to men on whom God's favor rests. And I believe it's time we turn to God. We desperately need, in fact, the segment that you had just before me shows we need God. And the confusion and chaos in our country is one evidence that God is missing. And we need to call on Him. We need to pray. We need to return to our faith in Him, asking Him to return to us and bring us the peace and the blessing that He's promised. But we need to turn to Him.
We are so grateful that we live in a country where we can celebrate a National Day of Prayer. What does this day mean for you?
Well, I think it's wonderful. And it was signed into law by President Truman after my father gave a message on the Capitol steps. And then President Reagan designated it would be the first Thursday of every May. This is my first year to be in charge of the observance tonight. So we've moved into the Statuary Hall. It will be in the Capitol, prime time, 7:30. It will be live streamed, so you can find it on the nationaldayofprayer.org. You can find it on the website. And just join us as we come together and pray for God's blessing on America.
We definitely will. We'll all be lifting this great country up in prayer today, thanks to you and to so many others that are involved in this. Thank you so much. Give our best to your dad and your brother and your entire family.
Well,
I know he's
you,
proud
Ainsley.
of you.
Thank you.
You're
God
welcome.
bless you.
Thank you. God bless you. Newt Gingrich is coming up. He knows a thing or two about whipping Congress into shape. We're going to get his take on today's health care vote. Plus, Pete's having breakfast with our friends. We deployed him to Dubuque, Iowa, an area that had not voted Republican since the 1950s. That is, until President Trump came along. He's talking to the voters next. And service. We've heard that music for months now. It means it's diner time.
That's right. For Pete Hegseth, it means time to serve some beer and coffee. Do they mix in the morning? We're going down to Dubuque, Iowa.
I hear that music in my sleep sometimes. That's how
I
often
know,
we're out
yeah.
here. We're excited to be here in Dubuque talking to great folks all morning long. And Iowans know their politics, especially in this place, which is a toss-up district. Dubuque County went for President Trump this go-around. And as we always do, we want the pulse of the people. We hear enough from the pundits and the Beltway elites about what they think. What do the voters really think out here in Middle America? And as a Minnesotan, I'm happy to be here in Iowa as well. I feel like I'm amongst some great people. Bonnie being one of them. We didn't get a chance to talk to you last time, so we teased America and said we would talk to you now. Bonnie, there's going to be a key health care repeal and replace vote, it seems, in the House today. That's an issue that you're passionate about.
Yes, I really want to see better health care, lower prices. People are having just outrageous premiums they have to pay every month, and it's just very difficult. We need a lot of changes. Maybe we can shop across the borders, shop around for better insurance.
Well, Iowa's going to need to shop around because the last insurer in Iowa's exchange has announced that it's probably going to leave.
We are really down to the wire here. We've got to get something.
And you mentioned the military, something very important to you.
Military is very important. Our veterans need to be taken care of. I'd like to see more respect given to our veterans and our military that they were lacking the last 8 years. And I have 2 grandsons in the military, one in the Army Reserve, one in the Air Force heading to South Korea in September.
Well, certainly a hot
spot,
yeah.
It's very important to me, and as a grandma, I'm worried sick.
Well, thank you, Bonnie. You delivered. We said Bonnie would deliver, and she did. We've got some other great folks. What's your name, sir?
Travis Kleinfeld.
Travis, you've been to how many Trump rallies?
23.
23. Wow.
And one inauguration.
And one inauguration as well. That's right. Maybe one more. What drew you to the president?
Just what he says. I mean, he stands up for the people. He stands up for the police. It's just just what he stands for. I mean, he just seems like a pure gentleman and everything.
And this young lady behind you, also a paratrooper, by the way, I learned, so served our country. Thank you for your service. Very much appreciated. So we also want to just get a sense from Trump supporters, folks that have voted for President Trump, what grade would they give him here just 100 days in, and then a quick amount on it. I asked you, I tried to serve you a beer, but you're not 21. But you are old enough to vote, and you voted for President Trump. Why? First of all, how would you grade his performance so far, and what do you like about it?
I would give him a B+ probably. I think he's been actively fulfilling his campaign promises, but if I had to give him any advice, I'd say to cool it on Twitter.
Cool it on Twitter?
Yep.
He might be tweeting about you right now. Ma'am, what's your name?
Marilyn.
Marilyn, and how would you grade the president?
An A.
A, and why?
Because he's promised, kind of sticking to his promises, trying to drain the swamp, trying to do what he promised.
Sure.
But despite the fact, all the opposition that
overwhelming
he's facing.
resistance,
yes.
boycotting, resisting,
yes.
all of that. Thank you, ma'am. Sir, what's your name?
Dave.
Dave, and how about grade and why?
Absolutely an A. You know, he had an aggressive agenda. There were no surprises when he was campaigning, and he hit the ground running. I know he's faced a lot of headwind here, but he's trying to get stuff done. Just not a lot of help.
Sure. Ma'am, grade?
B+.
And what makes it a B+?
Well, he's tackling disastrous Obamacare, but I too, like my son, get very uncomfortable with the tweeting, so he needs to tone that down just a little bit.
Okay. Ma'am, how would you grade him? A. What's your name again?
Karen.
Karen, and why would you say A?
I think he's trying to keep his campaign promises. He's not having a lot of cooperation, but he's getting there.
Absolutely. And sir, what's your name?
Burnell.
Burnell, and you give him a what?
A. He'll make America more competitive in the world market.
Absolutely, something that needs to happen. And that answer brought to you by, what's the name of the beer here? Duber. Duber. It's Duber in Dubuque, Iowa. We're now, this might be our last segment, which means I am due for a round of beers for this great crowd here. Beers and breakfast with friends is what we're doing in Dubuque. Some really informative folks. And this is why we do it, because regardless of what the Beltway and the elite say, the people who voted for President Trump certainly stand behind him.
It's amazing that they have not voted for a Republican since the 50s.
Swing state, swing area right there. Pete, good job. Very nicely done. You know, the people of Iowa, because they've got the caucuses, the first, indication in the country on presidential election years, everybody in Iowa knows politics. And so that's why it's so fascinating to hear what they think. That was a great discussion.
They know politics and corn, right?
They have a lot. As high as an elephant's eye, I think that's how it went. Meanwhile, coming up, Newt Gingrich is here. He's got advice for Congress and the president.
And a Florida woman sees an opportunity and takes it. The only problem, the cameras are always watching.
Well, this is a Fox News alert in the 1 o'clock hour up on Capitol Hill. The House is going to vote on the American Health Care Act. According to the people who count the noses, they have exactly on the button the number of Republicans to pass it, which would be as good as they can get to repeal and replace Obamacare.
So Newt Gingrich joins us right now. He knows what it's like to pass major pieces of legislation and have to maybe beat everyone about the side of their head to get it done. Mr. Speaker, is this going to be a good day for Republicans?
It probably is, although you don't actually beat him around the head. You do what President Trump did yesterday with Fred Upton, who's a very important leader. He listened to him. He found out what Upton's problem was. They developed an amendment that solves that problem. We now have preconditions, I think, pretty decisively taken care of. So everybody who's worried back home about making sure that if they have a precondition, they can still get health insurance is going to be assured that this has been done exactly as the president campaigned last year. If this does work today, and I'm really looking forward to this vote, it's an extraordinary moment. If this does work, it's a tribute really to President Trump, first of all, because he has personally weighed in, listened to people, thought it through. The art of the deal is applied to legislation. Speaker Ryan never backed down. He kept working at it despite how difficult it was. And frankly, Mark Meadows of the Freedom Caucus, who came right back and said immediately when the first bill failed, look, we want to get something done. We're not opposed to getting something done. And Mark Meadows held open the door with the president to a conversation that ultimately may well produce a bill today. If it passes today, it'll be an extraordinary achievement. I candidly didn't think they could do it. I thought they'd have to come back for another month or two and continue to work. So this is a great breakthrough if it happens this afternoon.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. What does it mean for the people that are watching, for America?
Well, it means we're going from a system that's disintegrating. I mean, Obamacare in state after state's falling apart. In Knoxville, Tennessee, thousands of people won't be able to buy insurance. Insurance company after insurance company is announcing that they're withdrawing from Obamacare. People can talk about preconditions. If you can't buy any insurance, you don't have any protection for anything. And in I think in 1/3 of American counties now, we're down to one insurance company left. So Obamacare was collapsing, except in the big cities. And the fact is that this is a great breakthrough moment. It means we're going to move towards more choices for people. We're going to move towards more honesty in actually being able to afford the insurance. We're going to guarantee that people with preconditions are
There's just got to be a good plan, Mr. Speaker. We don't know the details yet. If it's a bad plan, it could spell the end of the House for Republicans. If it's a good plan, it would lock them in.
Well, if it's a bad plan, that's going to be fixed in the Senate, but I think it's a good plan. Look, this has improved. The truth is, this bill got better by not passing initially. They have had some very good modifications in this bill. It increases the range of choice. It increases freedom for the states. It lets the governors manage Medicaid much better. It allows people to have a greater guarantee that they'll be covered even with preconditions. This is a stronger, much stronger plan than it was a month ago, and that's the way the legislative process should work. If it passes today, of course, it goes to the Senate, and we'll see how much of this the Senate can then pass. But I think this will be for President Trump a tremendous breakthrough on what was really the only thing that people said he didn't get done in the first 100 days. So if this now gets done, maybe it took 107 days, but he's getting there.
Are you suggesting that the Republicans actually read what was in the bill?
Oh, look, there are a lot of people who know what's in the bill.
I mean, no, I'm saying, remember Nancy Pelosi said, let's pass it, let's don't read it, let's pass it, and then we'll read it and decide what needs to change.
This has been the opposite of the way they rammed through Obamacare. This thing has now been drawn out so long. So many experts have read it and taken it apart. So many people have written about it that I think actually members today will probably know more about the bill than they could possibly have known a month ago. And as I said, the senators are also taking this very seriously. I know a whole group of Republican senators who have been meeting regularly every week, thinking this through at their, not staff level, the senators themselves. People understand this is really a big deal to get us back on a track of a better health system, and I think there's a real determination to try to get it done this spring.
All right, let's switch gears, talk a little bit about Hillary Clinton. A couple of days ago, she was very honest. She was talking about her humiliating loss. She said she takes absolute personal responsibility, Newt, but at the same time, she continues to blame Russia, James Comey, you name it, it's somebody else's fault.
Well, I was watching earlier today, you had the two authors of Shattered on. I've been reading their book. And I said it's like watching a car wreck in slow motion. I mean, it is just unbelievable. I think they started to write the book to cover the election of the first woman president. And by the time election night was over, they realized they had a totally different book. Look, Hillary is sad. I mean, she can't come to grips with reality. She can't come to grips with reality about her server, her emails, the Clinton Foundation, all the different things that swirled around her. And I think she can't come to grips with having lost. I mean, somebody needs to sit her down and counsel her. They got to say to her, Hillary, you lost. Not Comey, not the Russians, you. And of course, she spent her whole lifetime wanting to become president, and I don't think it's going to happen.
So having Newt Gingrich criticize Hillary Clinton is not a big deal. Having Bill Maher do it is, and having David Axelrod say this, to me, is significant.
Jim Comey didn't tell her not to campaign in Wisconsin after the convention. Jim Comey didn't say, don't put any resources into Michigan until the final week of the campaign. She never fully was willing to take responsibility for her mistakes, particularly that server. She said the words, I'm responsible, but everything else suggested that she doesn't really feel that way.
Wow, that's called backlash. Am I correct?
Well, look, remember, Axelrod was part of the team that beat her in 2008.
That's right.
And Axelrod's a very smart guy. I like him a lot. He has a great institute at the University of Chicago. But the fact is, there ain't no love lost.
Yeah.
I think the serious Obama people feel really betrayed by the sloppiness, the corruption, the incompetence of Clinton and her campaign, and I think they're dismayed that instead of consolidating what Obama tried to do, it's now being taken apart by Trump because she failed.
So speaking of President
part
Trump,
of what you're getting is.
We're coming up against a hard break here shortly. Got to do the news, but I saw you wanted to give some advice to the President of the United States, and that is, now that it looks like he's on the verge of this big win in the House, maybe it's time to get in that big airplane of his and fly around the country and talk to the people.
Look, I loved what he did in Harrisburg the other night. It was presidential, but it was presidential at the grassroots with thousands of people. Every time Donald Trump can get out of Washington and be surrounded by 20 or 30,000 people, he gets stronger. He's reminded that's the reason he's president. Not the Washington bureaucrats, not the Washington lobbyists, not the Washington news media, the American people. And I wish he would have a minimum of one town hall meeting a week where he went somewhere in America and reflected on those 20 or 30,000 people who love him, who are desperate for him to succeed. It brings him back here, I think, with a renewed sense of being willing to fight in Washington for the American people who elected him.
I'd much rather see red, but I want to see him in blue states too, to try to win some of them over, who seem to be fed up.
He should do the whole country. He's president of the whole country.
Yeah,
he could even go to Hawaii.
And perhaps his greatest accomplishment is on deck that no one's talking about right now. North Korea is lashing out, not at us, at China, for their insincerity and betrayal and for going along with America. Could China, after all these decades, finally be cracking down on North Korea? It only happened because of perhaps the relationship that took root in Mar-a-Lago. Maybe they're not there yet, but they've already been further than I could ever remember.
No one could have imagined that Donald Trump could have 5 or 6 hours of meetings with the president of China and have this kind of relationship.
Times have changed. All right, Newt, we thank you very much for joining us from our nation's capital.
Thank you. Good to see you.
With you.
All right. Coming up, Ainsley.
President Trump vowing to revive the economy by slashing taxes and adding jobs. The property man, Bob Massey, is here with what it all means for your wallet.
And it's Famous Dave's Feast with Famous Dave himself, Janice Dean, getting a head start as we barbecue now our breakfast.
Quick headlines now. You can now eat your daily dose of caffeine. Einstein Brothers is launching the world's first caffeinated bagel. The Espresso Buzz Bagel contains a third of the caffeine in an 8-ounce cup of coffee. And a woman is caught on camera hitting herself in the head to fake workplace injuries. Watch as a sprinkler falls from an office ceiling in Fort Lauderdale, landing on her desk, missing her, of course. But the woman then looks around to see if anyone's watching before smashing